today's video, we're going to cover Chapter 5, how to test and debug a JavaScript application. So first, let's talk about the differences between testing and debugging. The goal of testing is to find all the errors in an application before it's put in production. Now, one important point I wanted to make is there's, in software industry, there's, costs associated with everything. And the cost associated with fixing a bug in production is a magnitude greater amount than it is to find it in a testing phase. There's different reasons for that. One of them is, there's usually a process around fixing things once it's in production. So there's a lot more resources that go into that after it's already been in production. That's one thing. Another thing, it could be if that error that took place was, caused an issue where maybe a user couldn't submit an order. There may be other loss of income as well. So there's a lot of other factors that are involved in an error that makes it to production. So something to always keep in mind, because that's kind of important part of it's never good just we'll just throw it into production and worry about it later. That's not really a good way to look at things. The other type of, besides testing, there's also debugging, and debugging is to fix all the errors before the application is put into production. So that basically means you already know there's an error, and so that we need to go ahead and figure out what's causing that error. Where in our code did something happen that caused that error? Okay. There's three types of errors that can occur. There's syntax errors, runtime errors, and logic errors. And we'll look at each of those. So here's an example of a logic error. This would not display an error. You wouldn't see an error in the console or anything. This is basically a logic error. And so you've got a total investment, and you've got an annual interest rate and a number of years. So, just using common sense here, you would realize that it wouldn't be worth $10 million in 10 years, not a $10,000 investment. So you made a error in your formula to calculate this. So this is considered a logic error. Now, syntax errors are basically you misspelled something. Like an example here, they've got a query selector, and you have a TER, and here you have a TOR. So obviously if you did this the wrong way, it would not work, correct? Also, when you create a function, usually you're going to have parentheses, open and close parentheses. Sometimes you miss one of the parentheses or both of them. Also, if you start something with a single quotation mark, you need to end that with a single quotation mark. And also, if it's a double quotation mark, you need to complete that with a double quotation mark as well. And then also we have our open and close braces. That's important too. Sometimes the JavaScript engine won't complain about certain things, and you don't realize that. And sometimes you'll see syntax errors, but they don't always. Sometimes they can mask themselves in different ways. Usually the JavaScript engine is going to complain about those errors, but sometimes it's not always the case that occurs. I would always use I know you can use statements without semicolons, but sometimes that can cause an issue, and if depends on the certain circumstance, but just by using best practices, it's always best to use semicolons at the end of every statement. And then also, you have to watch when you create a variable, you have to watch your variable names. Like in this case, you got a camel case with an uppercase T. Here, you're just all lowercase and you don't have the camel case. Sometimes you just can't, you don't see those things. So, it's something you have to be very mindful of. And here, they're just speaking outside of even JavaScript, since a lot of our, most all of our client side JavaScript's usually, tied to HTML. So, if in a HTML field, if you have sales tax, the ID, you need to make sure you have the correct ID, what you're using in the JavaScript and what you're using in the HTML document. So it's not always just what's in the JavaScript. Sometimes you have to also be looking at the HTML as well. Here's some problems with data and comparisons. Make sure that you want to you want to use some strategies in how you handle user data. You always want to check your user data before you use it for something. So, that's kind of actually like the first thing you should always test for. And when I say test, I actually mean in the code. When you're in a regular method, you want to check, is that data that came in, if you need it to be numeric, is it numeric before you do some function on that? That way you can control not necessarily getting an error, and you can find that out right at the beginning of the process. You just want to make sure you use parse int and parse float when needed. And here's a common issue. A lot of developers usually, I can almost think like almost every developer at one point in time did something very similar to this. Is when you use one equal sign, you're basically assigning a variable, usually to here it's just assigning A to B. Maybe you're assigning A to the number 10, whatever. But, one equal sign is basically assignment, all right? When you've got two equal signs or three equal signs, that's equality. So you're saying is A equal to B, and that's with using just quick review that's with the concept of coercion, where basically JavaScript will go ahead and convert that if necessary. If you have a string here, you had a string that's a number 10, and you tried to multiply that by a actually true number, which was a 10. It will convert that so that can make that possible. Whereas when you have the triple equal signs, it does not do the coercion first. So if you have a string of 10 and a number of 10, this will not be equal, correct? Okay. Also, as a review, we went over floating point arithmetic before, and just this kind of emphasizing that a little bit, that floating point numbers are imprecise, and there's you can, in a lot of cases, it depends on how important that number is for rounding purposes. Especially when you're using currency, money, and stuff like that, it's very important. But so a lot of times you can fix a decimal place issues with floating point numbers by using the two fixed. But just wanted to make it review the fact that it's not really precise, and there still can be problems, even though you may not see it. You could run many iterations of something. Your website could be using floating point numbers and not see it for a long time. But then, if you do enough arithmetic with floating point numbers, sooner or later you're going to have some issue with rounding. Now there are, like I said, two-fix is kind of a quick fix, but it really doesn't solve it. It just makes it just makes it, it's kind of like the first level of defense, so to speak. But really, there are some JavaScript libraries that handle it a little better. But, it's just something you always want to keep in mind about floating point numbers, and the way that they're, that they are imprecise. Here's an example of a future value application. It has the valid data in it. And here's an example where you have invalid data in it. And in this case, the application is checking for that and then returning, sending an alert back that, hey, you got invalid data here, right? So here it's discussing two critical test phases. One is basically, test your application, using valid data, especially like when we're doing like a future value and maybe investment return, stuff like that. You want to make sure that you test that thoroughly, all different variations of good data, right? Valid data. Make sure everything's working as expected. But then you also need to test that with bad data, like put special characters in the fields. If it allows you to put special characters in the fields, you want to put all kinds of junk data in your fields, and you want to verify that you get a message, a warning message maybe that's saying, hey, please put in, this is invalid data, please put in valid data, things like that. You don't want it to just throw an error in the console and stuff like that, right? So you want to make sure that you handle your errors gracefully, so to speak. The second part here is talking about having a test plan. That you should have a written test plan where you have a list of all your valid entries you're going to make, and this is your test plan. So, and all the different fields you're going to test, what data you're using, and the results of that test. And then you also want to do a test. Part of your test will also be invalid entries. You list all your invalid entries you're using, and then you want to test the different limits and all allowable values, and you want to show your results of that as well. Here's discussing two common testing problems. One is not testing with a wide enough range of entries. You might miss things because you're testing with small numbers, as maybe and as opposed to larger numbers. So you want to make sure that you're doing both the smaller numbers and larger numbers. Also, another testing problem is not really knowing or understanding what the results should be on each. So that's something you really need to understand what's going on there, and basically it's never good to to assume the results are correct just because they look correct. You need to verify that formula. If you're doing a formula, you need to verify it maybe with a calculator, Excel spreadsheet, whatever, just to make sure that it lines up correctly. We're going to go into some of the concepts as far as from the book's perspective about like the developer tools. We've been using developer tools for a while now, but we're going to go ahead and, some of this will be a review. Some of this might, be a little newer. And then, when we get done going, there's a handful of slides we're going to go through here. And then we'll go ahead and go into Chrome developer tools to show some more functionality about debugging and logging as well. So basically the quickest and easiest way to open up Chrome developer tools is when you've got a browser open, you just hit F12 and that'll bring up the developer tools. You can also do Control-Shift-I. And the other way is in the upper hand corner, there's three dots, and you can choose that, and then use the navigation to choose Tools and Developer Tools. And then when you're done using the developer tools, you can just click the X in the upper right hand corner, or you can just hit F12 again. Here's the different options when you're actually, this is debugging code, which this is something we haven't done yet. And this is basically where you can put breakpoints in your JavaScript file. And so when you reload that page, when it hits that breakpoint, it will bring up the console. It will bring up this window that is basically the debugger, and you can go through each line of code. You can and actually see the value of the variables and different things there. It's a way of debugging your code, so that if you have an error, you don't know what's wrong. This is a very useful tool in trying to find the true cause of an error. So you basically have 4 different options here. You can step into the code, you can step over, you can step out, and you can just resume. Well, just basically you're stopping the debugging process when you hit resume. Resume is F8, step into F11, step over F10. And if you want to step out of something, will be Shift F11. We will go ahead and we'll go ahead and take a look at this in the developer tools. So now we're going to go ahead and look at Chrome developer tools a little more, and also get into how we can use the Chrome developer tools for more than just logging console messages. But we'll talk about that still a little bit more as well. But we'll also look at how we actually debug, set breakpoints, and can inspect our variables and see how things get loaded and so forth. So here I've just got a simple HTML file and a JavaScript file, and I'm just going to right-click this and open this with Live Server. So now we're in here. So the first thing, let me close this one. So this is more of a review, but I'm going to still go through this anyhow. So to bring up the Chrome Developer Tools, you can hit F12 to bring up the Chrome Developer Tools. Also, you can, the 2 other ways you can do this is hit Control-Shift-I to bring up Developer Tools. Or you can click the 3 dots up here in the top right, More Tools, and Developer Tools. All right. So for most of our purposes, we'll be using, like the elements tag, console tag, sources tag, tab, I should say. So I want to show you a few things here. So with the console, we're in the console right now. There's different levels for console. And as you can see, if we click default here, these are the 3 default ones: info, warnings, and errors. So let me show you how that looks. So we're going to go ahead and click Run Console Types here. And as you can see, kind of ignore this first one because this is just about the live server reload enabled. But the next 3, this is an info message. We used info. This is a warning message, and this is an error message. The warning message has this triangle with the exclamation point warning, and this one has the error message icon. And it will tell you where the error came from and where the warning came from. Info doesn't tell you that. It won't tell you it won't mention the exact function. So I wanted to kind of show you a little bit more on this. So if we look there, we see this debug, info, warn, error. We only seen the info, and down here, let's make sure we can see all these. We only seen the info, the warn, and those error. But what you can do here is, and most of the time you really just want the default one. Verbose can really print out, especially if you're importing maybe some frameworks, some JavaScript frameworks. There might be, verbose is for you just when developers sometimes will almost put a log message after everything they do because they want to just, it's an easy way if there's a problem to enable the verbose, and you can see all kinds of messages about every single thing that's happening. But it does take up a lot of memory in the browser, so it's really not very helpful. And so you probably should have at least, you probably should have verbose not enabled. So you just click default and it won't. If you do want to have it, by clicking verbose right here, as you will see, this is a debug message. Now that will show that one. Okay. Also, I did want to mention, well, a couple things here is in the sources there, we have this file. This is basically our JavaScript file. We can actually change things in here. And when we change things in here, it doesn't say, these changes aren't really saved within like our Visual Source Code editor. It's just saved here within memory at this present time. Once we reload this page, any changes we make are gone. Okay, so I'm going to change this console.info to console.log. And as you can see, there's a little asterisk up here showing that it's changed. I'm going to hit Control S to save it. And it's saved, and it just has a warning message here. So it's basically tell you changes to this file were not saved to the file system, just to let you know that. The reason I changed this from info to log is because really info and log are the same thing. Just like debug was the same in verbose, log and info are pretty much the same thing. And so if I save this, I save that, and if I run this again, which is the console types, it shows the debug message, the info message, warn message, and error message. These last four here. So me changing that to log or info did not make a difference. So when would you use different things? Like I said, the debug stuff is when you really want to have a lot of different information available, but it's really not best to have that. If you have that, a lot of those debug statements, you probably really don't want the level to have the verbose here, right? You kind of want to have that back to the default, which is info, warnings, and errors. And right when you click that, it got rid of the debug statements. So for info, you're not wanting to put every little single thing in info. I did this, I did that, loading this, loading that. It's more, just some general information you're doing here and there. For our purposes, it's a little different, when you're really building applications for a company, an organization, or whatever, and how you do things. When we're just practicing, trying things as students, and that, it's fine to put a bunch of info messages, but it's something you want to do kind of sparingly here and there. We're doing it just for learning purposes, right? Now, a warning message, that would be something like, maybe something on your page. There's some, lots of different functionality on your page. There's some little piece of functionality that, may not be used by everybody, and it could be used, and something didn't load properly, but you don't want it to be a catastrophic error message, maybe just a warning. You could use warning for like an error message. That's like, somebody comes to your page and nothing got loaded. It's kind of unusable. They're going to get errors when they try to do things. Something like that. That's when you would use the error, the error log one, right? So I hope that makes sense. Just really realize if you ever, like I said, any changes you make to your code here, you're just doing this for debug purposes and for testing purposes. Once you refresh this, that's going to be gone. Okay, the next thing I want to show you here is let's look at here. Let's do this real quick. We can make this a little bigger. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here. I'm going to put a breakpoint at some of these functions we have. I just wanted to show you something and how things get loaded a little bit. So I put a couple breakpoints right at the function level, right at that where the function's defined. And now we're going to go ahead and hit this reload. Now on the right hand side here, you'll see this. We've got some different options under scope. We have script, we have global, right? We have script and global. And you'll see later when we get more into a function, you'll see a local scope as well. But right now we have just the script and global under the scope. So if you look at the script, this kind of loaded when we click that reload button. It added all the different functions that are available. But as you can see, it says value unavailable, basically unavailable here. So what happens is the JavaScript engine. So when we put the breakpoint, right now we're in the process, the JavaScript engine is in the process of reading this file in. And so that first breakpoint, it reached that point and now it's stopped. And so if we just go ahead and continue on from here, we're gonna go over these different debugging functions here in a minute. But if I go ahead and just go ahead and go to the next one, and as you can see on the right hand side, the demonstration console types, now it actually has that function loaded. That function's loaded. If I do another one, it's going to load that function, and so on until I'm finished. And let's just click here to end it all. So it actually now loaded all those different functions. Let's see now. Okay. Next, let's go ahead. I want to look at this strict mode. I don't know if we talked about this enough. So I'm going to go ahead. When I click this run strict mode, it's basically going to execute this function. And we've got this variable that we don't have, we don't have it as a let or a const or anything. We just have this undeclared variable like this. And so if we go ahead and click run strict mode, we don't see anything in the console, no errors, nothing's wrong. Now, so this is allowable. But generally you really want to use the use strict because it's gonna catch things before they become a problem in your code. So you really want to use strict. Probably one of the bigger reasons you wouldn't want to use strict is, let's say, you're working somewhere and you're dealing with a lot of legacy code. Well, that legacy code may have a lot of situations where they have variables like this, and if you put a use strict in there, it's going to throw errors. So maybe until that code gets rewritten to adhere to the latest JavaScript standards, you probably don't want to have use strict at your code, at the top of your code base there, at your file level. Now you can use strict just within a function itself. So, it's not limited to, you don't have to have it just in the whole file, but you can use it in the function itself. So let's just go ahead real quick and do that. So I'm going to come over here and so here we're just going to go ahead and do we're going to use this use strict here. So we're using use strict here in the function. I'm going to save this. We're going to come over here and reload this because it's not going to be here, right, until we reload this. Oh, no, it did put it there, didn't it? It reloaded when I saved it, sorry. Yep. So it reloaded when we saved it. So now we have this. So now if I go ahead and click run strict mode, you're going to see that now it is saying you have an undeclared variable is not defined, right? So just want to let you see how that works. And it's like I said, you should really always use this in your code. You're writing new code. You should be, using the, later specifications for writing code, so that should not be an issue for you. And it will it will help find issues before they become a bigger problem for you. Okay, so here, let's go back and get rid of that code. Or better yet, I can just go ahead for now and just make that a let, and save that, and now it's still going to show that error. So we can correct this by just using a let and save it, and we're good now. And as you can see, you don't have your error message down here anymore. All right. Let's see. Next thing I want to do, I want to go ahead and we're going to put some breakpoints in here now so you can see how we can walk through this code. So I have two functions here. One is this calculate tax. And then I have another function to actually test this calculate tax function by passing it different numbers, right? And then it's checking to see if it's true. And this is a good way for just testing code that you have. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to put a breakpoint right here. And then, so then all we need to do here is click run test calculate tax. And it's going to go ahead and stop at this breakpoint. And this is just a log. So obviously you don't see it down here at the bottom. You don't see it in the console. Here's the console.log. We don't see it down here. But once I'm going to go ahead and here's our different, up here we have our different controls for debugging, right? The first one here is resume script. So if you click this, we'll basically, I'll just go ahead and do that now. If I click this, it's just going to basically, it's going to end debugging. It's just going to continue through the whole JavaScript function and it'll just come back with at the end. Boom, we're done now. It completed that. So now I'm going to just go ahead and click run test again. Now we're back here again. And if I go ahead and the next one here is step over, either you can click this or hit the F10 key and it will basically step over that into the next line. So it's going to go from 44 to 45 there. And now we're at line 45, even though this is where the breakpoint is, so that's always going to stay there. But this is the actual line that it's getting ready to execute. It hasn't executed it yet. So this line 44 was this one, testing calculate tax function. So when it was there at the beginning, it wasn't there until after you go to the next line. It's not actually executed until you go to the next line. That's when it's executed, right? So here, though, we have this calculate tax. Now I could go over this one. So let me just step over this one and it'll just go to the next line 46. So I'm just click that F10 or this one up here, and it's just going to go to the next line. However, we are calling this calculate tax, right? So let's say I want to go into that function. What I can do is instead of clicking that one, I can click on this next one here, or F11, and this is a step into. So this will actually step into that function. So I just clicked it, and as you see, now we're in this function. And you can continue here. You know, maybe sometimes some things will call a different function, and you could you could go drill down multiple levels if you've got one thing calling another function, right? We don't really have that here, but you know, that's possible to do that. So here we can just, we'll just go ahead and hit step over, step over, step over, step over, and we'll come back and hit, now we're back here to, well, it hasn't really executed this completely. Well, it's executed calculate tax, but it hasn't written this to the console yet. So once I go one more, it'll write it to the console. So let's go ahead, and one thing we can do is another one you can do here is called this F9 step. And this is basically just going to step one line to another line. If it reaches a line where there's another function call, it's just going to go into that one. It'll just constantly go into the next thing. It'll step to every line, and if that one has a function, it's going to step into that. You don't have to explicitly step into each one. It's just automatically going to step into everything. So we hit step here. It's going to go into that calculate tax, and we can just keep hitting step here. If there was another function, it would call that one. In this case, these are these predefined ones. It's not walking into those. We step over, And so another one that you can use is if you're in a function, you want to get out of it, is this one here. I'm waiting for it to pop up. And this is Shift F11, and this will step out. So what this is going to do is this is going to return control back to the calling function. And if I click this, we're back to where we were, the calling function. And we can continue to step over until we're done, or we can just resume script and it'll complete the script. The next thing I wanted to look at here is there's another one. I want to take a look at this one here. I think we'll put it right here. We'll get rid of that one. So we're going to do this run debug with Chrome tools. Okay. And so we're in here now. So what I wanted to show you about this is, so we're inside a function, and inside a function, there's going to be any variables that you create within this function are local to this function, right? You've got this const A, const B. So the visibility of these variables are only while you're within this function. Once you leave this function, you won't have visibility to these variables anymore. So the scope, we have a scope here, right? We open the scope up. We've got a local scope, we have a script scope, and we have a global scope. So in our local scope, we have these three different local variables, A, B, and result. And here's 10, here's the 20, because we've already executed it. We've gotten that point. If we would have put our breakpoint here at the beginning, these would be undefined over here on the right until they're assigned a value. But we put our breakpoint here, so these have already been assigned. But the result, this hasn't been assigned. Result hasn't been assigned yet because it still has to finish this line, right? So that's the local. So I also wanted to show you. So this is what we kind of already looked at. So this is that script scope, and this is basically showing all the functions that have been loaded and are available. So these all have been loaded, and like we did just a few minutes ago, we put a breakpoint at multiple functions to see as that JavaScript file is loaded in by the JavaScript engine. It goes ahead and assigns those functions to the name itself, right? So we have that, and then we also have this global. And so this global is like we've talked about the window object, and the window object is your whole browser, right? And so here's all the different functions and properties that are available to be used within that window. And as you can see, one of the first ones is the alert, right? So when we call an alert, when we use the alert function, this is what it's using. It's using this global window alert, okay? And there's plenty of other ones as well. I'm not really going to go into them too much. Here's confirm, which I know you've already used confirm. Some of the assignments. You have a document. Document's part of the window scope, right? And there's plenty of other ones as well. Okay. Also, just wanted to mention the call stack. So basically, the call stack is just it's keeping track of everything that's kind of in order. So right now we're in debug with Chrome Dev Tools, but it's possible that you can have a call stack that could be a lot. There could be other things underneath where you're calling multiple functions, and it's all within multiple one after another in the call stack. But in this case, we don't have that. So I guess that's really about all I have. With these tools, the debugging tools and all that, you just really have to play around with this and see how things work. You know, it's something where, you know, the more you use it, the better you get at it, and it's very helpful tools for JavaScript. You know, compared to how it used to be years ago, there's you know, it's great at what you can do nowadays with them. So that's all I have, and thank you very much. Have a good day.